But so I had this Sunday kind of stuck in between those two Sundays, and I think I'm going to preach a sermon about the church, and specifically, not really a state of the church address, but I'm going to talk this morning about three major themes that will be extremely important for us in the coming year. In senior staff, we talk about strategic initiatives, and there are more than these three, but these three are important to you as well. So we're going to be working on that today. And I invite you to turn with me to Matthew 16. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you this," I want you to listen to this verse. "And I tell you this, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will never prevail against it." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, it's a really interesting text. You may have never heard it before. You may have heard it dozens of times. Most preachers, now we got her energized now. That's good. Most preachers know this text, of course. It's a famous text where Jesus turns to Peter and he says, "You are Peter, and not only Peter, but Peter the rock. And upon this rock I will build my church." And then he goes on to add, "And the gates of hell will never prevail against this church." What do you suppose that means? Do you suppose that means that the church will always survive? Well, that's what I think. I think that's exactly what Jesus is saying. The church of Jesus Christ will always survive. To some extent, you and I have to acknowledge this. The church doesn't belong to you and me. It belongs to God, and the church will always survive and thrive, and in one way or the other be vital. But does that mean that every expression of the church will always survive? Not at all. There's a church right here a few blocks from where we are. When I came here in 1983, that church was one of the most vital local churches in this city of about 83,000 people at the time. About 3 weeks ago, it had its last service, closed the doors forever. Same thing happened in Princeton, where we are going with a campus, as you know. Will the church always survive, the church of Jesus? Yes, but every expression of that church? I don't think so. Back in the early 40s, there was a government program called the Manhattan Project. Many of you remember the Manhattan Project. It was the government program to build the atomic bomb right there in the middle of World War II. And the Manhattan Project was carried out primarily in two places, one in New Mexico where the research was done, but the other was in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, what became Oak Ridge, Tennessee, in eastern Tennessee. These two rural Tennessee counties, Anderson County and Roane County, really just farmland, rural people living there. And this is where the U.S. government decided to build Oak Ridge and the Manhattan Project. They moved in, they started building temporary housing, and thousands of people flooded into these two rural communities. And so there were all of these churches, and you would have thought that this would have been the greatest thing in the world to happen to these little country churches, wouldn't you? Not necessarily. All of these new people, these visitors, these city people, these people that aren't like us, started flooding in there, and on Sunday mornings they spread out and they went to these country churches. And it was so concerning to one of these churches that they literally went to the county commissioners of Anderson County, Tennessee, and they had an ordinance passed which forbid people from being church members unless they owned land in Anderson County. It was a strategy that worked. That church today, now sitting at a wonderful crossroads, is a restaurant filled with people all the time. They come for the chicken fried steak. It's a lesson maybe we need to hear, isn't it? In order for a church to not only survive but be vital, it must have the doors flung wide open every Sunday, every Monday, every day of the week. I got to thinking about this. Let me ask you this question. If you were going to close the doors of the church or not welcome somebody into the church, who would it be? And I'm making the point here that you don't really have to close the doors. You just need to narrow them a little bit. So I want you to think about this for a second. If you were going to close the doors of the church to a person, who would it be? Would it be a person of another color, another language, another ethnicity? I don't think so. What about a person with a different political or ideological perspective than yours? Would you close the church to an agnostic or an atheist who is searching? Would you close the doors of the church or not welcome a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Muslim who wants to learn more about Christianity? Would you not welcome a person who had a different view on an issue like sexuality? Would you close the door, not dealing with issues of safety here, but would you close the doors to a person who has a criminal record? Who would you close the doors to? If you're sitting there thinking and you're trying to think of who it is that you would close the doors of the church to, and you haven't been able to come up with an answer yet, that's the right answer, isn't it? That's the right answer. The minute you start narrowing the doors of the church begins to die. And so let me suggest to you that we have three major themes that are going to be a part of who we are during 2014, 2015, what the senior staff refers to as strategic initiatives. The first is serving aggressively beyond the walls of this church. And to some extent, you already know about this. Our commitment to build a campus in Princeton, Texas. Almost a year ago, January a year ago, the members of the Methodist Church in Princeton voted to close the doors of the church. They did. We now have the property. I don't know. It's not very good property. I don't know how long it will be before we sell it, but we're going to sell it and reinvest that money in this new campus. Some of you have seen, I'm going to show you a video, 1 minute and 18 seconds. This was done, a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago maybe. This is when we were just introducing you to the concept of Princeton, Texas, who it is. I want you to just take a look real quickly.
In January, Christ United Methodist Church is going to open a campus in Princeton, Texas. We will be one church in two locations. Princeton is 7 miles east of McKinney. The population has more than doubled in the last 10 years, and there is no United Methodist Church. New houses are being built every day. The school facilities are top-notch. We have an opportunity to be a part of this growth. Just as CUMC originally met in a school 40 years ago, we'll initially meet in Clark Junior High. We are looking for members of CUMC to be on our launch team. We're looking for people who want to be a part of something huge. We need volunteers to help with children's ministry, with hospitality, and with the setup and takedown each week. Consider yourself a missionary for Christ United Methodist Church. Just as if we were going to start a church in Africa or Asia, this is a holy opportunity. Christ United Methodist Church will be a church that loves people where they are, experiences God, and radically serves. For more information on how you can be a part of this exciting opportunity, contact me, Clay Horton at clay@cumc.com. I hope you'll prayerfully consider joining us on this journey.
Well, I love how Clay puts it. This is a holy opportunity. When we filmed this a few months ago, we didn't have anybody recruited to go to Princeton. But 2 weeks ago, we had the first, what we call the rehearsal service. It's not open to the public. We'll have about 6 months of rehearsal services over there. And I want to show you 2 pictures of the rehearsal service. Watch the energy in this room. This is Clark Junior High, 200 people exactly. I think there were 201 people there. A lot of them volunteers from this church. This is going to be, I think, a vital and strong congregation. And we got a picture of Clay preaching in jeans and boots. How I long What a great place. What a great and exciting ministry this is. Let me tell you something that we're going to do in Princeton. I am so excited about this. We may be the first church, literally in the United States, to create a new campus where before we even get on the ground, we make the commitment that one of the first staff members will be a trained social worker. Why? Because we're going to take Project Hope type ministries and transplant them to Princeton. So this will be a church with a remarkable mission emphasis from the very first. And I want to tell you one of the ways we're going to be able to do this and give credit where credit is due. The Texas Methodist Foundation, located in Austin, Texas, believes so much in Project Hope, which we created here in this church, that for a number of years they have literally paid churches to start Project Hope. They provide grants. If a church will come and say, tell us how to start Project Hope, we want to start one. The Texas Methodist Foundation has given us a grant of $80,000 to do this in the Princeton campus. So when you go to bed tonight and you start to say your prayers, thank God for the Texas Methodist Foundation and for their faith in us and in this remarkable, their faith in Project Hope, their faith in Christ Church, and their faith in this campus over in Princeton. Serving aggressively beyond the walls. I want to give you a pop quiz. Are you ready? How many worship services do we have on a regular basis every week here at Christ Church? 3, 4, 5? Here's the answer. We're not going to grade you. I know none of you, I had to go look myself. I wouldn't have gotten this right. 3 sanctuary worship services. The Impact service in Trinity Hall, which is our contemporary service. Every Sunday night, the new Refuge service, which is a service that our youth staff created for our youth. It is a wonderful experience. Now Princeton, by August or September, maybe July, depends on how the momentum goes, we'll be worshiping every week in Princeton. Guess what? Legacy at Willow Bend, which is a retirement community. Every Sunday we have 2 worship services over there. One for the regular retirement community and one for the skilled nursing section of that facility. Creekside Nursing Home, the Alzheimer's unit. We have a worship service there. We also have several other worship services in our nursing home ministry. All of these are conducted and led by remarkably committed volunteers. The question mark is there because we don't know where the next one's going to be, but there will be another one. Another campus, perhaps, surely another nursing home, but probably another campus. We are aggressively, radically committed to serving beyond the walls of this church. Second major initiative is we are committed to reaching the next generation at all costs. I'm talking about our children and our grandchildren these days. There's a story that I've shared with you for years. Some of you have heard it 2 or 3 times. We can't tell this story too much. Over 20 years ago, I was sitting in the living room of my home. I was surrounded by new members of Christ Church who had come for a dessert party. And we were going around the room, and I was asking people to introduce themselves and tell us why they came to Christ Church. I'll never forget this woman. She was sitting right in the middle of the couch in my living room. We got to her, single mother. It was very simple. She told us her name, and then she said, I came to Christ Church because my 6-year-old daughter came to me a couple of months ago and said, Mommy, how will I ever learn about God if you don't take me to church? You could have heard a pin drop onto the carpet of my living room just like you could here in this moment. Let's don't ever forget that story. And we should be aggressive as parents and grandparents, making sure we get our children to church so they can learn about God. And we should be aggressive as a church in making sure that our ministry to children is nothing less than the best, the most powerful and creative that we can be. And so we're doing interesting things in children's ministry. About 6 months ago, I guess, in August, I preached a sermon series called Why the Church is Important. And the first sermon in that series was, why is the church important to our children? And during that sermon, I told a story. You might want to go back and hear that sermon. I told a wonderful story about how the church changed the life of a little boy who grew up to be an important person in the state of Tennessee. But I also did something in that service because I knew back in August that there were some things that we wanted to do in children's ministry that were going to require money. And so I hadn't planned on doing this, but I just started ad-libbing, and I said, let me tell you, we're going to be doing some really creative things. They're going to be talking about, we're going to need money, and I'm looking for lead donors for this project. After that service, a young father came up to me, and he said, look, I have a son. It's important to me. I want you to know you can count me in. And I said, here's what I actually said. I said, we're looking for lead donors who are willing to commit $25,000 to $100,000. So you can count me in. I said, look, when can I come to your office? I made an appointment. I went to his office. He and I talked about it. And we made a decision to invite 5 other young fathers to lunch. This is exactly how it happened. So the 7 of us, 6 young fathers and 1 old grandfather, sat around the table that day, and at one point I said, do you think we could raise $1 million? And every one of them said, yes, we'll do it. Those 6 families committed $275,000. They had a couple of dessert parties and invited some other families to join them. As of this morning, there are 44 families who have committed to $871,000 by Easter. So we're $130,000 away from $1 million, and we're going to ask you in a moment to help us make that $1 million a reality. Nothing is more important in the life of this church than our children. When I came to Christ Church in 1983, we were all young. I was 34 years old. I had a 2-year-old son and a 9-year-old son, and we weren't the youngest ones in the congregation by any means. Our church was children's ministry in lots of ways. 30 years later, children's ministry is different. We need top-of-the-line technology, and we need exciting environments. And in a few minutes, you're going to hear the Reverend Derek Carter, our new minister to children and parents, talk about what we're going to do in children's ministry, and then we'll make a pitch for you to write a check. This last initiative, invite. We're going to ask you to be aggressive in inviting other people into the life of this church. There's a program that we've had for a number of years called Invite One. It's a really simple program. It just is exactly what it is. It's a reminder to take this opportunity to invite one other person to come with you and visit Christ Church. You're not sitting where you were sitting this morning because you didn't have anything else to do on Sunday morning. You're sitting where you're sitting this morning because somehow this church has made a difference in your life. Maybe it's the music, maybe it's the liturgy, maybe it's the sermon, maybe it's the children's ministry or the youth ministry or the Bible study. We're going to remind you every Sunday to not be selfish about that. I promise you that there's somebody in your circle of friends or relatives or neighbors that you know well who is waiting for an invitation from you. It's real interesting. All this technology we have, we can do more with email and email newsletters and so forth for less money. We can reach thousands more for much fewer dollars than we could a few years ago when we were in a print media environment. Social media. And yet still, the most powerful way of passing on the gospel, of sharing it with somebody else, is the personal invitation. So when we talk about holding the doors of the church wide open, we're talking about you taking seriously Invite One. And the fact that there is somebody in your life right now whose life can be changed by being invited into the ministry of Christ Church. Invite. invite. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Back to this original question. Will the Church of Jesus Christ survive and be vital forever? The answer to that one is easy. You bet it will. Will Christ United Methodist Church continue to be vital forever? That answer rests with you and me.